Welcome to the College Essay Advisors podcast. Before we introduce ourselves, here's a little preview of what's to come.
There's just a natural relationship between reading all of these other essays and the work of other students and the compulsion to compare that I think for me, it would be very challenging to separate those two things. And I see it in students when, they come to me and say, okay, I really like my essay, but it isn't this and this and this. Welcome to the College Essay Advisors podcast, an ongoing exploration of how to write admissions essays that get you noticed and accepted. Hi, my name is Stacey Brooke, and I am the founder and chief advisor at College Essay Advisors.
My name is Becca Myers, and I am the director of advising at College Essay Advisors.
And today we're going to talk to you about why reading college essays can hurt you as opposed to help you.
Okay. But Stacey, I thought you're supposed to research.
Yeah, you know what? It can never hurt you to fully understand what the task at hand is in any given situation, really. But as far as the college essay is concerned, and we have another podcast about what is the college essay, you definitely want to understand the assignment. So research, yes. But as far as reading examples of other people's college essays go, I think there's a tipping point that comes pretty early in the game in terms of exposing yourself to too many examples, other people's stories that might not be relevant to you. I think once you kind of get an idea of what a personal essay is, sometimes, oftentimes, exposing yourself to just a wide breadth and depth and endless barrage of examples and other people's words can confuse you as much, if not more, than it assists you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I also think it can undermine your individuality. And if you try to follow too closely what you think you're supposed to do, then you're actually not going to set yourself apart. So if you're, for example, applying to Harvard or Yale and you're looking at what the most, the top essays were for the last year, you can't write your essay about how interesting it was to shop at Costco. That's been done. You can't simply sub in Target for that and assume that you've got a winning essay. So it helps to sort
Mhm.
of do a gut check and figure out first what you really think your story might be and your voice and all the things that make you stand out before you at all go and dive into other people's work to try to copy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to that point, I think it's worth noting that the books that collect examples of essays that got students in, etc., oftentimes those are a representation. Of course, they're a representation of the cream of the crop of the students that do get accepted. But I also think the examples that are chosen are the most writerly, often the most representative of creative writing prowess. It doesn't necessarily give you a cross section of the of varied students that are applying and get accepted to these institutions. So the Costco essay, which is a fairly recent viral essay, in which a student writes about a trip to Costco and her observations of the people around her. It's a really beautiful, creative, insightful essay, um, is an example where the student who is writing this essay is clearly a talented writer. That's something that she had planned on focusing on in school. Not every student has those natural skills, those goals. So I think there's also something to be said for being true to who you are in terms of the kind of story you want to tell, the structure of the story you're going to tell, and following your instincts in that regard. Not everyone is going to identify some wild metaphor or wildly creative concept. It just isn't going to happen for every student, and that's okay. I think there are so many different ways to write a successful admissions essay that part of uh part of success is understanding who you are, where you're coming from, and what feels authentic to you.
I wanted to just say that working with students over the years, I found that it is most often, not always, it's most often the parents that come to me having read the book of winning
Mm-hmm.
essays from previous years.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really encourage parents listening to this podcast to step away from that, to trust the process. And as Stacey said, understand that there are many ways to write the essay. There's many topics to consider. Even if you were to write about Costco, there's many approaches to that essay. There's the metaphor approach, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
more straightforward narrative approach where you maybe tell a story. There's the braided essay where you talk about Costco and then you talk about swim team. Like there's all kinds of ways to talk about a
Mm-hmm.
bulk item store, and it doesn't all fit into one Costco box, right? There's many different approaches.
100%. 100%. And I think for most students who are just familiarizing themselves with the personal essay as a form, even understanding what makes some of these essays successful is really challenging. It's hard for most 17-year-olds, most 45-year-olds to unpack what is actually resonating with these essays and how to recreate that, which is why I think it's easier and makes more sense to identify the story first, identify what it is about yourself you want to communicate, and then to um, try to work through strategies for how to best communicate that on the page. But I think drawing inspiration, it's of course, look, we're writers, we get inspired by other artists, we get inspired by things that we read. So I encourage students, read, please read. But I think as far as looking to other people's work in this instance, very specifically, sometimes what others have accomplished can get in your head. I think it can be hard to trust your gut instinct when you're comparing yourself or comparing what you're trying to achieve to what others have already spent, by the way, 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours working on. So at the beginning of the process, it can be intimidating. Of course, it helps to have an understanding, as we're saying, of what you're trying to accomplish, but there are also some downsides in terms of, you know, where you want to start, where you want your headspace to be when you start to explore for yourself what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, because all that crowding in really gets in the way of the process. And I've had students and parents to me say, I don't have a challenge, I don't have a
Mhm.
thing I've faced in my life. I don't have a hurdle. Or I've had students say to me, I'm not funny, so I don't know how to
Mhm.
write this. Like, I'm not gonna like I don't have a clever concept. And it's
Right.
really not about clever or funny. It is about sincerity and it's about conveying the information in a way that is interesting, but you don't have to be the funniest, you don't have to like open with a penguin eating cheese. Like there are all kinds of different ways to start your
Most of
essay.
them are lactose intolerant
Right.
anyway, so that
Some people hate cheese. It's such a risk. So you can't make yourself over in a personal essay into being something that you're not, right? Like
Mm,
I personally would have a really hard time sitting down and writing with 100% seriousness about anything. I mean, because I think that, and Stacey, you're probably similar, like our nonfiction tends to be, even when it's about something serious, there's always a little levity in there.
mhm.
There's a little
Mhm.
spark of something. And I think that's,
Mhm.
we have that in common. And I think that's what we're looking for when we're working with students is what is the natural thing that rises to the surface for you? And it might be that
100%.
levity, but it also might be, more serious side. And that's fine. Serious can get you
Mhm.
into college just as much as being lighthearted, right? You can write about death or you can write about your collection of anime. Like there's all kinds of things you can write about. And there's no one, key to unlock this door. There's many doors as well.
Mhm. Absolutely. Ultimately, you want your essay to achieve a few things. You want it to be reflective of what makes you tick, um, your essence, those intangibles, what your personality is like, what it would be like to have a conversation with you, what your deepest passions are, what are some of the things that motivate you to do the things you do. Um, Also, what are you going to bring to any college campus or community? What what value add do you have when you are coming into a new situation? Not in a transactional way, but how can you brighten and bolster the student body at any given institution?
When you said, "What are you gonna bring and what are you gonna brighten?" I was like, "String lights." Everybody
I,
brings string lights, right?
that is true. That is true. Could write a college essay about that.
You could.
Um, and then I think, you also do want to capture the attention of an admissions officer. Like I sometimes say you want to entertain, but also, as you were just pointing out, there are so many different ways to do that. That's why we love drama. It's why we love tragedy. It's not actual tragedy, but it's why we watch and read about, stories that are compelling and dramatic. And it's why we love humor. It's why we watch love stories. There are so many different reflections of humanity that are interesting and exciting for us to read about, that a lot of it is in the execution. And I think that hinges on the authenticity of the experience, especially as it relates to a student's personality, capabilities. Remember, you're also submitting a transcript, recommendations, a bunch of other materials that are going to speak to your natural interests and talents. And you want your story and the execution of your story to align with that. Also, you don't want this piece of writing to feel like it's coming from a stranger. So I think there's a lot of pressure, obviously, to create this incredible piece of writing that helps get you accepted and gets you noticed. And I think, you want to rise to the occasion, but there is also that comparative tendency piece that comes along with the pressure to do that. And I think there's just a natural relationship between reading all of these other essays and the work of other students, and the compulsion to compare, that I think for me it would be very challenging to separate those two things. And I see it in students when they come to me and say, okay, I really like my essay, but it isn't this and this and this. Or parents where they say, okay, yes, this is representative of my son or daughter, and I really like the story we're telling, but what about the Costco thing? It's not
Yeah.
that.
It's not that,
It doesn't
right?
have to be that. It
No.
it just has to be it just has to be representative of a student in a way that is compelling and authentic and real.
Yeah, and so many times people are thinking about the story not being stand out enough, and yes, what you're putting in the essay matters, but the tone and the earnestness also really matters, because you can read an essay that's about something super out of the ordinary, but if it has this sort of bravado to it or
Mhm.
falseness,
Mhm.
almost like you it's almost like feeling something AI generated. You could have an amazing series of events, but if it's not undergirded by some sort of authenticity, or it's like
Mhm.
it's like who do you want to just go get a cup of coffee with? Do you know what I mean? On a
Mhm.
base
Mhm.
level, like I do think there is that. It's not just simply the narrative that you're telling, but
Mhm.
it's the voice and the words you're choosing, and you can't just decide from reading sample essays that you have to be someone else. Like it just doesn't work that way.
Completely. And I think, if anything, students should concentrate more on turning inward and the reflection. That's the piece that ultimately I think is going to connect you and make you feel like a human, not a number, to an admissions officer. And that's also how you like break open a story that's even something really small. Like I bring up often an essay about a student who was writing, and her mom was driving her to gymnastics every single morning. They would have like really thoughtful heart to hearts on the way to gymnastics, and then she got her license and didn't take this ride with her mom to school every day. And her reflection on what that meant just in terms of her relationship with her mother, what those conversations meant to her, what it meant to grow up and be an adult and gain independence. um it's the tiniest slice of life. It's something that everybody goes through, or that many people go through, or some relational experience to that many students have. um but the reflection that she does, the details, the small details of the conversations and the way that she highlighted other things that were happening in her life, um, the things that are important to her family, like that's where the magic of that essay happens. And you can't find that in other people's work. You find that in yourself.
Mhm.
I will die on this hill of don't read too many essays. I really think it complicates the process and again just sort of adds stress to an already very cluttered um hyper headspace for ambitious students and parents of students who are trying to accomplish big things. And I think part of what I hope people take away from the application process and the essay writing process in particular is the ability to take a deep breath, self-reflect, um, learn something about yourself and separate yourself from that comparative tendency instead of leaning into it, which I think is so easy to do in a situation like this. So I think, that's something that I know I definitely, and I'm sure Becca, you too, emphasize with students. So for that reason, when someone starts to go down the road, student or parent, of, but what about this essay? But what about that? Or this, this piece of writing isn't this, and it isn't this. I really, as often as I can, try to steer someone more in the direction of, but look at what you bring to the table. Like shut out all that noise.
Oh yeah,
Get rid of the static.
and I just hang up on them. They won't even engage in that conversation.
It's
We
it's
have our own
policy
methods,
here.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
policy.
it's policy.
Yeah. That's our episode for today. Thank you so much for listening or watching. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to follow us for more. Happy writing.